You are watching Omnis Protocol, and we are here with a very, very exciting game. This is the LVO Finals, and who is going to do commentary with me except the Lizard Wizard, Dyzard. You know I'm still going to make jokes about that forever. What's going on, dude?
Oh, it's going, and it is okay. I can't tell you how many add-on nicknames get added to Dyzard. There's just too many to count at this point, and it's hilarious to me. So it's the joke that never dies.
Yeah, it's the EverQuest names that follow us forever.
Indeed.
But dude, I'm so excited that you're going to do commentary on this one with me. This was a super interesting game, and at least you get to kind of live vicariously through this moment because you didn't get to do LVO with us.
Cries in sickness.
Yes. So the rest of us are all sick now. You got sick right beforehand. Preface this before we get into the game. I think this is probably implied for people who are used to commentary and things like that, but just to be very explicit, obviously Dyzard and I were not playing in the game. We did not feel any stress in the moment of this is, the final round of a GT that you're trying to win. Tied for, I think, the biggest GT so far. There's all sorts of additional stress. We're also looking straight down, doing this from the comfort of our own homes. It's just very, very, very different for us. And we're going to analyze plays for discussion's sake for all of the people who are watching the video, just so we can talk ins and outs, talk about what we like. And we all have different approaches to the game. If we all played the game the exact same way, it wouldn't be nearly as much fun. So just want to make sure it's clear we're not trying to say anything negative about the players or their decisions. We're just trying to make for interesting commentary. I mean, I can say I have absolutely nothing but respect for both Kenny and Scott. Fantastic players, and I'm so grateful that they allowed me to record the game. Dyzard, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I just want to say that I don't know if the video is put up right now, but if it is, or as soon as it's put up, you can kind of see the Scott's tools, and I appreciate the fact that he's using the ones he painted because those look really cool. I don't know, I saw that, I had to point it out. But no, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to discussing this with you. I think just getting into it real quick, I think it's super interesting that we have Kenny playing Spectre, which we know from sci-fi that he loves it. He's known for Spectre, and same thing with Scott. Scott's playing Iden and Moth. So I think the biggest thing to look at and going into this game is they have probably played this game against each other so many times that it makes it super interesting that this is the finals of the GT. So
adding on to what you're saying, because I actually wanted to hit on this as well, they're playing the same roster.
Yeah.
Right? They both have Never Tell Me the Odds. They both have the same Spectre list, and then they both have the same Iden Gideon list. If you've been a part of wargaming for a long time, it's extremely common for the top players in a particular community to sort of end up gravitating towards feeling the same way about the top lists, right? That is extremely normal. That's why WTC originally in War Machine required people to play different things. You play so many games together, you will just eventually kind of agree on what's best. So they brought literally the exact same roster, but push come to shove, finals match, Kenny wants to play the Spectre side, and Scott wants to play the Imperial side. So even though they're kind of in agreement of the two best lists, they obviously have a slight difference in opinion as to which to play in the finals. What are your thoughts on why they chose this way, and which would you choose?
I think it comes down to, because listening to Zion's Finals, the podcast, Scott is very much talks Moff Iden is his comfort list. And Kenny definitely talks that Kane and Hera is his comfort list. So I definitely think that it was just let me go with my comfort list. I've played this matchup a million times. Let's just play the comfort list. I think that's really what it comes down to. And I don't, if it was me, I'd do the same thing, especially if I go into somebody who I play as a regular play partner. I played their list a million times. I'm going with my comfort list, because if I try to change that, let's say Scott decided to go Kane and Hera, that it's just kind of weird at that point, because it's not the list that he's most comfortable with from listening to Zion's Finest. I want to pick my comfort list, especially in a mirror.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And so, again, I love your political response of a non-answer. But no, I agree with you that they're probably both picking from the perspective of just what they're most comfortable with. And that's the absolute right thing to do, right? You know, when it's this closely matched, lean towards what you are going to know as well as possible, what you're going to make the least amount of mistakes with, that sort of thing. Now, all things equal, and I'll go out on my limb first. My gut says that the Imperial side is advantaged, and that might just be Moff Gideon. Like, because they're both playing Never Tell Me the Odds, I think denying the ability to reserve creates some additional conflict for Spectre, where, yeah, I mean, the Spectre can occasionally spend 2 to reserve, but I just feel like that could escalate and just trap Spectre in bad situations, and it's just like it's an added level of risk. Now, obviously, Hera's really good too, and Hera has incredible swing. What are your thoughts if things were equal and they had equal experience with both sides, or as you and I, and we had equal experience on both sides? Do you think you would play Spectre, or do you think you would play Imperials?
I would argue, me personally, I would play Imperial. But
Yeah.
for like, I do think that looking at table side also with this, I do think Scott has the advantage table side based off of what I could see in this image right now. Is ladders look more advantageous. You got Dark Troopers jumps. You got a lot of points that are up that are going to be super important from me expecting the outcomes of games. I just feel like Empire has elevation advantage, where Spectre is more advantage on like more flat ground stuff. I also think that with like revenge triggers, elevation can be extremely important, and I imagine we're going to see some of that coming into play in this game. Because if Iden is able to kill freely without being punished, then that is a huge leg. And then, as you said, I definitely think Moff is a great primary into Spectre because of the reserve tax. Spectre isn't known for being super force efficient, and that hurts gameplay.
Yeah, obviously, a list like this, you really want to utilize Kallus rerolls, not have to spend 2 force to reserve a character, right? Yeah. That throws off the power level of the list quite dramatically. And one of the weaknesses of Gideon, right, is he dies fairly easily. He is not the tankiest boy. But at the same time, it's not like Spectre hits crazy hard. I mean, it can with rerolls, but it's not anything too crazy. But yeah. It's also interesting just how different these lists are, yet at the same time, how closely matched. So, indeed. All right, dude, I think we should, let me do a quick review of the exact teams. So Kenny has Kanan, Ezra, Chopper, and then Hera, Kallus, Rebel Commandos. And then Scott has Iden, Hask, ISF, and Moff Gideon with DTE and Dark Troopers. So these are, outside of Kallus and Rebel Commandos, this is almost just playing boxes as is.
It's crazy. It's crazy to see, like, I'm so used to top table events being you had to put this much money in to play this list. And this is literally like almost bare bones investment.
Yeah, it's not that many boxes, right? Like, if you wanted to duplicate these guys' list, you got 2 Imperial boxes to buy, and then 2 Spectre boxes, and then you have to buy the Han box and the Thrawn box.
Yeah.
Right. Really not that bad in the so $300, right? Roughly. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and dive into this thing. You ready to start the video, Diz?
I am ready.
All right, we're starting it now. Okay, so here they're just looks like they're finishing some setup. So we probably could have cut this part out. But do you like having some deployment in these sort of videos, or does it not matter that much?
I think deployment matters more to Shatterpoint than we, even as content creators, as we like let on. I think that deployment is something that needs to be talked about more and discussed more, because there are important decisions that need to happen in deployment, especially depending on terrain. This map, maybe not as much, but I do like seeing when people pair or their matchups. Like, who is Scott going to pair against Hera? Who is Kenny going to pair against Iden? Like, those are interesting decisions to me and definitely worth like highlighting.
Yeah. So Scott is putting Gideon across from Kanan, which means Iden's going to go across from Hera, which that seems like the obvious choice to me. Do you feel like that would be the same plan that you would go for?
I do agree with that. Iden has the opportunity, if she's drawn early, that she can kill Hera in deployment, which is kind of insane. I look for that a lot with like when I'm playing Maul, because Maul can go and kill Hera in deployment, and it just offsets the whole entire Spectre game, because now Hera has to pay more to pick up Ezra for that point secure, or whoever she's picking up. Making Hera's force cost increase is such an advantage, especially if you can do it early.
Yeah. Or just punishing the Rebel Commandos for deploying further forward is also really easy for Iden. So I like it. This is interesting because for, say, the semifinals where we were talking about Matt's game, I kind of was like, since they were kind of playing Rebels versus Rebels, my gut would be that I would rather not have priority. In this one, maybe you kind of want priority, like in this particular matchup. Like getting to control who deploys against who.
I don't know. I'm very much like lately of the opinion that I like slow rolling Never Tell Me, and I like going second on Never Tell Me to like kind of like push that slow roll more. So personally lately, I would say I would prefer to go second here instead of being able to have priority.
Yeah. So all right. Well, at least we're on different sides of that one. Okay, so looks like they're just finishing up deployment. They both have the range 3 deploying infiltration units. I always love when the players shake their hands like right as things get rolling. I'm like, shit's underway.
Yes.
Okay, so Scott gets the deployment where he only has one that he starts deploying from the actual deployment line, but his ISF are going to start off controlling that middle one, and Kenny gets the two kind of safer protection spots, and then the other objective is the far right.
So I look at this, and I always think the side that middle point is on is where you want your pusher, like being like a Vader, or in this case, I think Iden being on that side is amazing for him. And then Kanan being on the other side is not so great for Kenny, because Kanan's the pusher, right? So I think with the flip, I think we already see Scott advantage off the flip.
Yeah, I would say, I think I agree there that I'm sure I've played Never Tell Me the Odds and have Kanan and Ezra on the side where there's that lone objective, and that is definitely where they like to be. So it looks like Kenny reveals Kallus first. This feels to me like a totally reasonable pull. I would be happy seeing Kallus right away. He's not that fragile, and he's got a long enough range gun that he's able to get up to the middle point and then still take a shot at the ISF. So I like this play. I wouldn't do anything any differently. Do you have any thoughts on this opening play?
I mean, when you go and you roll 3 like naked crits, like that's pretty good. No, I don't hate this at all. I think Kallus is a fine pull to go first. It's better
Kenny,
than getting...
the crits are with you.
I think having Kallus go first feels a lot better than having to feel like you have to push Ezra. It's not something you feel like you have to reserve. It's also just getting him in position to where he can just do stuff. You're not like overcommitting any of your weaker pieces, especially in the Spectre list.
Well, and Kallus can be a really awkward one to pull later on, right? Yeah. Like when he's not able to impact a point. So
exactly,
this is solid. Would
like,
you have still? Oh,
sorry. I was just gonna say I definitely feel like pulling Kallus early is better than late, because there are a lot of times where when Kallus is pulled late, he just doesn't have anything to do. You're like, well, I guess I'm gonna dash and then I'm gonna sit on this point. So being able to be actionable is super important.
I think there is conversation to not spend that force with Kallus, though, and conserve it for something else. it looks like he not only spent the force to get the free focus and the additional dice, but also a reroll. There is a part of me that would like to keep that a force 0 activation, right? Since you're not scoring yet, there's a part of me that's like, maybe I just move twice, take a 6 dice shot at the ISF, let it be what it is. What are your thoughts on that?
I would argue that I think he's trying to get like some serious damage early in the game and trying to push that aggressiveness into
for
him.
Sure.
And like once he spent the force to do the focus, he's committed at that point. And at that point, you're like, I need to bet the most out of this because I'm already committed one force. I might as well spend the other force to make the most out of this situation. So I don't hate the second force, but it's like, I don't think it's not necessary to do the whole entire thing, but I do think that he has a plan of I need to be aggressive early with his positioning.
Yeah, fair. All right, so Scott reveals Iden. Every Iden player's favorite card to come up first. So get to see Iden do Iden things. So first off, they're just kind of resolving. He gets to move around all of the scouts, right? They're Imperial scouts.
Yep.
For some reason, I always want to think of them as spies, but I know that they're not.
Because they're sneaky. They got infiltrators, sneaky.
Yeah. So much movement.
Like I want to come back to that point with Kallus. So like, we look at the ISF. Sure. They took 7 damage and expose. Like, how advantaged would he have been? And that would absolutely be worth 2 force if he had wounded them right then and there. Like, being short 1 hurts a lot. But if he had actually done the 1 more damage, then he's feeling really good with his start. Especially with us saying that Scott's advantage on the flip. Kenny doing that would have been flipping those odds.
Yeah, I mean, it puts a force tax as well on Scott potentially. Maybe it's because I've been playing some Mandos and stuff recently. I'm always looking for plays where I feel like I can do something very solid that doesn't cost me any force. And Kallus is always hard because you're like 1 force for like 3 dice and then like 1 force to reroll 3 dice are both feel very effective, but there's almost always turns where I want more force.
Yeah. It does make me feel though that like, where is that extra force going to come from? Like he spent it here. Who's it got to come from? My immediate guess is going to be Chopper. Chopper's probably not going to spend any force on his turn.
Yeah. But I'm just also thinking about like how often could that force be spent on like defensive rerolls to keep someone like out of being wounded or just shy of being like, that's something I'm coming to love about Kallus that I think is people don't think about is like, you have perfect information. You know what your opponent's dice are.
Yeah.
Speaking of dice, we've got a big Iden attack going into, I believe, Rebel Commandos. Looks like he used all 3 movements already, and is just kind of kept himself just outside of range 2. It does look like Kenny forgot to put the hunker token on the Rebel Commando, but did roll the correct amount of dice.
I think that this roll right here is something that like that force could have been used for some rerolls to lessen this blow. It's just
I don't know. I think you let the Rebel Commandos die. Like the reroll is 1 reroll on Rebel Commandos. I think you trust that Iden kills them.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. So I believe he does get the wound on them. So right now they're checking the shove angle. Even though the template goes just past the terrain, there's a ladder attached there, and the ladder basically blocks the landing zone. So he just can't quite go off that side. So now we've got Iden following up so that she's on the point.
How do you feel about Iden being positioned this aggressively?
I mean, I think this is, if I will fully admit, I do not have nearly as much Iden experience as Scott has, but this feels like the direction to go. I am almost always willing to take my opponent's backline points when I can, This is like, you're going to score. You're taking a point. You're not playing against that offensive of a list. And you're on a side of the table where Kallus is already gone. And Hera is certainly not that offensive of a character. Will she probably get wounded if 2 Rebel Commandos shoot her? Pretty reasonable. But yeah, I like the play. I think going all in and getting Iden onto that point. Because if you saw from like one of the last games, Kenny got to have Hera's point active the whole game. And at least now Scott's back there like messing with that point right away. So
that's true.
Okay, so we got Kanan goes ahead and does his jump. And looks like Scott scores 3. So I mean, I would feel pretty happy about that if I were Scott. Obviously, I don't like my ISFs being at 1, but I mean that's a kind of an opener that you want.
Yeah, and then you don't have Kanan coming. Like my thought was Kanan would go towards Iden more and try to punish that positioning. But yeah, I am curious about that line because I'm not really a Spectre player. I don't enjoy playing them, so I'm probably just wrong here. But my immediate thought is I want to punish Iden, and the only person I see that can do that is going to be Kanan.
Fair. So here, I think that one of the important things to call out, you saw an advance from Ezra, and what they were trying to explain is rather than trying to navigate under the terrain, they were just going to walk Ezra but be above the terrain just for ease of movement, and he was immediately moving off of that terrain. And then jumps to the ladder. So now we've got Ezra is shooting at the ISF that's in the middle, who only has 1 health left and is exposed. All right. This looks like this is going to be a pretty easy wound for Ezra. And I believe on this mission, it is also secondary units are the challenging the odds. So leaving them at 1 does work out a little bit to Kenny's favor here. So now they're just kind of going through figuring exactly which part of Ezra's trees you're going to do. So first is resolving a shove. So Ezra does get the wound. It's going to be a reposition, heal 3, and then 2 damage and a jump. So plenty of damage. Not sure the healing is impactful, but Ezra has a reposition and a jump, it looks like. Yeah. I do not mind Kenny not measuring that. It's
yeah.
Yeah.
My question to you is, would you have rather gone for that middle point, or would you rather have gone and stolen that point that has everybody on it? Because I think there is discussion there that is interesting. I think he made the right call, but it does. Yeah. I think it's worth bringing up.
No, I think with the reposition and the jump, it might not have been a bad idea if he could have gotten to Iden's point.
Yeah.
That isn't... I hadn't really considered that. I don't know if he had quite enough movement. Maybe if he shoved himself forward as well.
Yeah.
Because he did have the one shove on the ISF.
The point I'm thinking about was Moff's point, because he only has 1 person contesting that point. If Ezra goes to that point, that means Dark Troopers can't move up the board. Dark Troopers have to stay there. If he draws Dark Troopers now, Dark Troopers
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to advance like they are right now. They'd be stuck basically by deployment. So you're controlling your opponent's positioning by making a move like that.
Well, I think the choice, I like his choice more than going after Moff's point, because it makes it a little bit more complicated to go after Ezra. I suppose Ezra being on the ground and being hard to shove off would be a good reason to go after Moff's point instead. But man, if you could go after Iden's point, this would be sweet, because the Dark Troopers then couldn't do anything to take a point back this turn, right? So if the shove plus reposition plus jump would have allowed him to deny the Iden point, that could have been cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hate that actually. I think maybe the Iden point might have been the better way to go, mostly because of the point, like you said, Scott's turn now turns into no gain. It just turns into moving up in board state.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like, does he reserve Dark Troopers, or maybe do Dark Troopers try to go straight forward and take that back point? That might be a possibility. Like, they might have to get some rolls, but
yeah.
So looks like Dark Troopers are going to take that point back from Ezra. They could not shove him off because of that antenna structure, and then Hask is like on the step just a little bit lower, so there's no spot to push Ezra to legally.
It also like creates like something that like I'm not a fan of with the Dark Troopers, where it's like they both have to be right there to take the point from Ezra, which makes positioning problems later on in the game potentially.
Yeah. Well, you're not. You're kind of spreading out the ability to do coordinated fire strain, but it might be nice to have that on an even wider field.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the board state, that's definitely where to go with the Dark Troopers. It would have been interesting to see if they could have taken that back point from. Well, they also, I guess, they can't shoot Chopper, so that would have been even harder to get at that back point. You'd have to be taking shots at Kanan, which then means he might potentially get to the point anyway.
The other thing of note here too is where the Dark Troopers are positioned. It also means that Scott is prepped already for Struggle 2 if the flip happens sooner than Dark Troopers get to go again, because you got somebody on that middle point. So now looking forward, he no longer has to be like, I need to make sure I have somebody towards the middle. He's already got somebody there. So that is a benefit.
Okay. So Kenny pulls Shatterpoint. Always nice in these heated matchups to have something with a ton of flexibility at a key moment in the game, because they've been kind of score 3, score 3, score 3. Who do you think you would Shatterpoint here? Like, it's kind of Hera or Kanan, right? Like, that's the real decision point.
I don't think it's Hera, just because if Ezra had died, I think it's Hera, but Ezra didn't die. And like, it wouldn't be getting a point. So who is getting me a point? And it's, I actually wouldn't be opposed to Commandos, other than the fact that they're already wounded, which hurts. But I wouldn't be opposed to them just because they can take that point from Iden. Like, and they're probably the easiest thing to get me a point right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Hera can definitely has potential to take the point back from Iden. So I think Hera is still certainly in the conversation.
That's fair.
I mean, getting Kanan further up the board is also of big value. But yeah, if it wasn't against Iden, I would probably really like activating the Rebel Commandos here.
Yeah, it's just scary, because if you activate them right now, then you are in severe risk of losing them before Struggle 3 even happens.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's where I was just like, this Scott's list just has so much wounding potential that reactivating them is certainly a risk. But Rebel Commandos are so good. You know, I'm pretty much always happy to activate those boys. Let's see. I always have so much respect when the players go into the tank a bit. Like, what's the best play here? And especially with, as you said, how often these two guys have played against each other and know each other's strategies and know how tight this game is going to be the whole step. neither one wants to slip up and make a mistake.
True. I do wonder, though, if Shatterpointing Chopper here is worth it just to protect that back point. Like, just putting Chopper, using your Shatterpoint just to get Chopper on that back point so DTE doesn't just come rob it from you, is actually kind of interesting. Because he won't be able to shoot Chopper. Chopper's still protected. And it's playing defensively. Yes, you're not gaining anything from it, but you're also not putting anything at severe risk into an aggro heavy team.
Yeah.
Oh, did he pick Chopper?
No, I believe he's doing Kanan, and he gave the dash to Chopper.
That's fair. And I don't hate this. It's forward momentum. It's getting stuff moved up. He can put some damage on the DTE. But I hate attacking DTE this early in the game because he's just gonna move.
Well, what I like about this is because of how fragile Gideon is as a character, this now means any time that Scott wounds anyone, Gideon is now close to Kanan, right? And so that means that Kanan can start putting that pressure on Gideon, which is not appreciated by the Cape Boy.
And that's fair. Would you spend 2 force here to, so like, let's say you attack Gideon here. Would you have attacked Gideon and then spend 2 force to push DTE off the point?
No, I feel like Kenny is definitely going through his force a little faster than I would prefer. And so I definitely agree with the attack DTE, get him off the point, and try not to have to spend force this activation.
So like the only reason I bring that up is like you're talking about like getting that damage early on the Gideon and then leaving him threatened to be just got by a cannon trigger is kind of spicy.
Dude, my last tournament, I shoved Gideon to the back of the board before he'd even activated. He was like strained and pinned, and I thought I had nullified his activation, and Donovan still swung like 3 points.
That's fair.
I do not doubt the strength of Gideon. So, speaking of a Gideon, now we have Gideon Hask.
Haha.
So, pull up a Hask card. It's always interesting. I feel like we don't talk about Hask's activations enough. Obviously, his identity is talked about a lot, but how strong his individual activations are.
He's just a good secondary. Like, end of the day, he's just one of the better secondaries of the game.
All right. So looks like he's trying to advance off of that ledge, and I believe Scott does not like his model and likes to throw him around a little bit. Maybe there's a relationship there with Haas that he rolls better after he's taken a little bit of roughing up. Okay, so now he's doing covert operations. So it looks like he's going after the point that Kallus is on.
Yeah.
And it's a Hask melee attack. How often do those happen?
Not very often.
No. Yeah. I always get a little nervous attacking Kallus because of the fact that he could reroll 3 dice.
Ooh, look at all those fails.
And whatever the relationship between Scott and Hask are right now, it is not a strong relationship. They're on the rocks a little bit. They might be seeing other people. They might be seeing other secondaries right now. So it looks like it's just 2 damage and a push. So that might not even get Kallus off the point. Because he can't kind of shove him directly away because of the terrain. Yeah, it looks like Kallus is still on the point.
Mm-hmm.
So no swing there. Score 2. Scott is on 1 on his side.
And momentum is tied at 8. I can count 6.
Yeah. When you play an aggressive list, do you feel like it's normal to have a big whiff like that per game? Or because you know me, I'm not that aggressive of a player, right? I play super movement and I play super revenge mostly. When you play something aggressive, do you feel like you're just going to have one of those a game and you just got to get through it?
I agree with that. I think you just plan that every attack that you need to make happen is going to fail, so you need to have a backup plan for like your alter, like what's going to help curve that whiff.
All right. So it's ended up being Hera, which I think obviously it would be very sad to have Shatterpointed Hera and then immediately flip her. So I think Kenny is probably quite happy that he did the Kanan activation.
Yeah, I agree.
I also am proud of myself. I'm doing a good job of not saying Kanan when I mean Kallus and Kallus when I mean Kanan. So I would like a point for that.
Only one, though.
So it looks like Hera dashed the Rebel Commando forward, which I think is smart. Something that I don't think is discussed enough is utilizing these free movements, whether we're talking about like Bo-Katan movement or movement from the primaries or Rex or whatever, to just sometimes move a character out of the way to open up a good landing spot. I think that's a really good lesson for players because you can't go back and do that after the fact. And so I think that's a very smart play on Kenny's part to just make sure that Hera has a good spot to go up the ladder.
It's also just like forward planning as well. It gives the Rebel Commandos a little bit more projection for further turns when he gets to draw them.
So Kenny doesn't have any models with forward planning. That's different characters.
Fair.
Okay. So what they're checking here is the push angle to kind of like ignore that antenna. It does look like the range 1 goes off the terrain, but it doesn't go off the terrain far enough that the curve of the base doesn't still overlap the gantry or that side of that terrain piece. Dyzard, do you remember what that piece of terrain is actually called?
Communications building? Probably.
Yeah. I should get into my head doing the commentaries to remember which because obviously there's like the high ground structure, right? Like we know that's the high ground tower, right?
I call that building the square round thing.
I'm sure that's AMG's technical term for it.
Makes sense.
What's funny is I probably literally have one of the boxes around here somewhere. Okay. So it looks like he did bring the Rebel Commandos back to good so that he could take that point because he wasn't quite able to shove Iden off.
Mm-hmm. I think he kind of has to do it at this point, though, just to save face with the game. I think if he does that, it's either am I just giving up struggle 1 or am I fighting this out more?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure he had to, but I mean, who doesn't want to score 4?
I mean, fair. I think he just puts him in a position that like he can win struggle 1 now. I think if he didn't do that, it's still very much like favored Scott. Yeah,
he scoring 3 is not really gaining any ground in this matchup, right? You kind of just expect Scott is going to at least be scoring 3 then the next turn. Yeah. So you're just going even. But bringing the Rebel Commandos back at least makes you feel like you're taking a step forward in that tug of war.
Yeah. And it's also like at this point of the deck, who else does need force on? Chopper probably doesn't need any force. Rerolls for Kallus are always present. Commandos are in a position they probably don't need to use force.
Well, you probably don't want to spend force on them anyway.
True. So the only real option in my eyes is when Kanan gets drawn. Kanan using a force. So he has opportunity to take the point. He doesn't need the extra force for anything else, really, to make major plays. So he has the one for Kanan that he needs.
Okay. So the players are rolling out the attack. Gideon was the card that was flipped. And he is going after Kanan, seeing if he can get Kanan off the point. So it looks like just some crits go through. Let's see how much damage we ended up with. It is a Darksaber attack, and he had some expertise, so I know there was some auto damage that was going to go through.
Yeah.
Also means no deflect from Kanan. Do you like it when there are damage on the expertise tree? Is that something you see as good, or is that something you see as meh?
I think it's a. We talked about this a lot with MCP. I hate referencing MCP with this stuff, but it's worth bringing up. It's one of those levers that AMG has that they can pull one way or the other. So instead of doing, let's say, 10 damage on the tree, I could do 9 damage on the tree and then 1 off of expertise, which then still equates to 10. But if you don't get any expertise, you're not like having that baller attack that just slapped people. You have different avenues to get there. So I think it's a super interesting design perspective. And I want to see more of it because it creates diversity in trees and characters' attacks.
I love it on Crosshair. I don't love it on very many other characters. Okay, so...
The 8 damage to Kanan?
That's what it looks like. Or I think what it was, so he dealt 5 and coordinated fire strained him, and Kanan elected to move and take the 3 strain damage.
So I like this use of... I'm assuming that was Lawn of the Empire that he used there.
Yes.
He's preparing more for Struggle 2. He's pushing somebody up to where now he is controlling all 3 center points. So whatever flips next Struggle, he has a good advantage of like being ready for Struggle 2. He's also projecting that ISF extra hit to dice with pushing up that model. So I really, really like this use of Lawn of the Empire. He's not punished at all for it because they're already wounded. I think this is an amazing use case of Lawn of the Empire.
Yeah, he's definitely taken a strong position there. Okay. So it wasn't a big score for Scott. It looks like he scored 2. Yeah, because he just took back 1 point. Yeah, so he was scoring 2. Yeah.
Kenny has to be feeling really good about Struggle 1 right now with having scored 4, and then your opponent can only score 2. Like, that feels amazing. So he's feeling in a very commanding position. Rebel Commandos go, which they had the whole Hera thing last, so they're just primed and ready to go. Kenny's probably just scoring 4 here again and getting momentum to close out the struggle. I very much see that as a possibility.
Yeah, that seems very, very reasonable. Okay, so
looks like he kills Iden.
So 6 total. So 5 damage on Iden. Oh. She heals back the pin, which I think is the right choice because even if the other one shoots her, it's pin on 1 anyway.
So I don't know if I like this move here. I think I would. Yes, he's spreading out, but Chopper's over by that point anyways. Why didn't the Rebel Commando just go after Iden as well? Unless I missed something.
He might be thinking that he's already got Struggle 1 in the bag, and so he's willing to drag it out a little bit and help his positioning.
Yeah, I personally, nothing's in the bag until it's done, right? Like, Scott could very well get a draw that just completely shifts this on its head.
Like a Shatterpoint?
Like a Shatterpoint. But it's very much like, I think, I might have just missed something where he did his attacks first and then he moved, which is probably fine then. Which I think that is actually what happened. So my point's completely invalid. But yeah.
Well, still, this is still. I mean, this is still a tough spot for Scott to try to swing back, even with a Shatterpoint. Um,
We call it ISF.
Shatterpointing the ISFs,
which is kind of wild, seeing as they haven't been drawn yet and they've been knocked once. And they're in a position that they are not in a safe position. They are very much in aggressive board states.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, as soon as he's Shatterpointing the ISFs, I'll be like, oh, can I kill them?
Yeah, no, that'd be my goal. My goal would be, I don't care, like, if I can get rid of ISF, like, in Struggle 2, that's amazing. That's such a good feeling. I don't know if I would pick ISF here, though, to be honest with you. Like, I think that it's fine, but I don't know if ISF are getting him the points he needs.
Yeah.
Unless he's just sacrificing Struggle 1, and he doesn't want to reposition anybody else because he likes the positioning for other people. That might be the play. Is I like where Moth is. I like where Iden is. I like where all these things are. I'm just going to do ISF to position better for Struggle 2. I'm not winning Struggle 1. I'm just going to lay some hurt down. Which, at that point, ISF is a great decision here because he can probably wound the Rebel Commandos again.
Yeah. Yeah, it might just be can you put too much pressure on the Rebel Commandos? Because if Spectre does not have those in Struggle 3, that would be huge.
Yeah. It is 5 total.
So,
which feels a little below par for ISF.
Yeah, because they can't spend the force to get the focus and the additional dice, right?
True.
So just a little.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Yeah, it's not too crazy. I mean, they're still just a support.
Yeah. So he bodies that side point to let him score, getting another momentum. Kenny's still in the driver's seat for Struggle 1, I think, though. He draws Chopper, though, which, I mean, Chopper's a murder bot. He could absolutely get up there and kill that ISF, which is kind of insane.
I think my Chopper knows that I don't really like him, and so my Chopper doesn't roll well for me.
That's fair. This is like one of those situations, I feel like, though, like, I really want to close out Struggle 1 because the more time I give Scott here, the more chance he has to pull back Struggle 1. Like, and this is where the whole force expenditure comes into play, is we know Kanan's the next card. I would have much rather reserved here if I could and gone with Kanan to just close out Struggle 1.
Yeah.
I think something else to note, too, is because of the early force expenditure with Kallus going super aggressive, Kenny hasn't been able to do any rerolls with Kallus. Because this last force needs to be used on Kanan. It doesn't need to be, but it's what it's for.
Yeah, see, I think in retrospect, I think the 2 force on the Kallus activation was definitely too much. I mean, obviously Kenny is winning the struggle, but with the way things played out, obviously, hindsight 2020, Ezra was easily going to do more than 1 damage, and so getting them so close to being wounded wasn't a huge deal.
It's also like we look at like board state, right? Like Scott only has ISF wounded, some damage on Iden, some damage on DTE, some damage on Darks. Kenny has Rebel Commandos wounded and almost dead for the second time. Ezra's wounded. Like, I mean, Empire's doing what Empire does.
Yes.
But
you're saying that Empire wounds characters? Whoa,
maybe.
Dyzard, you're just blowing up the internet now. Everyone's going to lose their minds.
But like, we look at like the cost versus like what was gained, and yes, you may win Struggle 1, and it's looking like Kenny will win Struggle 1, but we don't know for sure yet. It's looking that way, but he is in such a position that he needs this game to end sooner than later. Which again brings me back to, like, if I I wish I could have ended it last draw.
So let me catch up the players. So what is a chopper activation? He does spend the last force to jump, goes to a ladder, and then advances down, and looks like he is punching Gideon. The players right here are discussing, because Kenny rolled a couple of dice that bounced out of the tray, he was rolling them in, and Scott just wanted to be clear on like what was going on, and that we weren't like moving on to re-rolls or changing dice yet. Which I think that kind of clarity and stuff with players is just like always good. All right.
So I come back to, was there a way Kenny could have closed the struggle out here? Because I think now it's at the point where it's like he is giving Scott too much time than he can afford.
Yeah. All right. So back-to-back ISF activations. Kenny is only one. So he needs 2 points to win. He just scored. He's controlling 3 at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Yeah. So if Scott takes 1 back, Kenny just needs to take 1 back. Or no, it would be more than that. So we still got some fight going on.
Yeah.
All right. So this Rebel Commandos are wounded again.
Yeah. And again, I think this just comes back to, I think if Kenny had the opportunity, I without evaluating it closer, I don't know if he had the opportunity. But if he was so close every single time, I guarantee he's sitting there thinking, I need to close this struggle out now. Like, I need to advance this game state.
Yeah. Well, there's also just the element of like, if you just let Empire pick apart your units that much, especially if Scott has already conceded that he's going to lose this struggle, he doesn't really care that much about the revenge triggers, right? He's like, I know I'm going to lose this struggle. So the more damage he can spread and the more wounds that he can get now, that only makes Kenny's life harder as the game goes on.
Something that I like to do when I'm in situations like this, where I'm on the Empire side, right, is I like to tee up. Like, I know I'm losing struggle 1. I'm going to tee up a bunch of people to be like, cool, I can now wound 2 characters in 1 activation. This is amazing. And then just crush momentum that way for my other struggles by teeing up people now instead of just mobbing Rebel Commandos. Like, I probably would have, like, I'm losing struggle 1 anyways. Just leave the Commandos there. I probably would have gone to tee up Hera to get her in a more killable state. Instead of just laying more onto the Rebel Commandos. Because Rebel Commandos had, like, what, 3 life on them left? Like, that, that's a breeze for most of Scott's characters.
Damage on Hera can also just not matter. Like, her activation, it's so easy for her to heal so much damage back that putting chip damage on her can be a huge mistake.
That is fair. However, Shatterpoint's already gone, and she's already gone.
Yeah. But they're close to the end of the deck. So. Okay. So they're just getting the exact positioning down, wanting to make sure that the I believe the ISF fits where Scott was moving him to. Okay, so it looks like you need 4 points plus a wound. Again, we're back at that spot for Kenny. He's just like hovering at that like winnable, but not quite there yet. Last card is Kanan. Man, I swear all of my opponents' Kanan activations are always so insane, and he's another character that like does sometimes just drop the ball for me. And there's no force left. There's no rerolls. There's no force push. So let's see. So Hera's got the kind of top right point. The ISF's got the top left point. Chopper and Kanan are controlling the bottom left point. The central point below the high ground looks like that's controlled by Scott. And then the point on the far right is controlled by Scott. So where would you... Well, looks like we're finding out where Kenny was go with him. So okay, so what is he doing with Kanan here? It's kind of awkward, right? Because he can't just leave the point casually, right?
No.
So, did he switch to Suresu?
I think he did.
He did. He wants to sword fight with Gideon? Respect.
I mean, when you roll, two fails for Scott, and Kenny doesn't roll a single. Oh, he's got one. He's got two fails too. Okay.
Yeah.
But Kenny's got great great stuff going for him. He's only got to do 7 damage to him, so that's not too hard. I do hate though switching into Suresu at the end of the struggle though, because if you just happen to draw Kanan super early, then you're not benefiting from the force refresh, and you would have much rather had the pack leader. But he kind of needs to like go for that kill, right? Yeah. Otherwise, here we are in the situation. Like Scott just had too much time, and he's at the point where he could very easily pull the struggle.
Well, this is hard for DTE because like DTE also can't really affect a point. Right? Because he can't get both he can't get both Chopper and Kanan.
No, is it because Gideon has tiebreak?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he just takes that point super easy. It's just, what do you do that's actionable to game state? Because he still needs to get 1, 2, 3, 4 in a momentum. I don't see that happening here, but it does put Kenny back into a very precarious situation of what do I do? How do I close this struggle out? And that's the biggest issue. Is this struggle has gone on way longer than Kenny could have needed it to. It's hurting bad.
Yeah.
However, Kenny does have force again, so Kallus rerolls are back on the table.
Yeah, for something we thought was this was definitely Kenny's struggle, it's now feels very winnable for Scott.
Yeah. I just come back to though. I think that Kenny needed to close the game way back on Hera's not the game, but the struggle on Hera's.
Could
activation.
He have
that's the thing. I kind of want to go back and look and see if there was a line that he could have actually hit that mark. Because Scott has just had way too much time to enhance his board state and set up for the later game, as well as keep the struggle alive.
Yeah, Scott has done so much just good work in general on the table, just softening things up, getting his characters moved around to different points. It's definitely feels like Imperial tactical work, right? It's feels like there's definitely an Imperial vibe. Let's keep the rebels wrapped up while we take control of the rest of the galaxy.
And it's like Kenny's trying. I feel like he's trying to make these things work. He's trying to get to that thing. And again, I want to go back and watch again to see if there was a line he had that he could, that maybe we just didn't see. But maybe there just wasn't, and dice just weren't letting him get what he needed. Absolutely, that could very well be a factor here. I don't really disagree with any of the plays that he's made so far. I think that he's done what he could. It's just every single time I'm I wish he could have gotten that one last little push to just close the struggle out, because then Kenny feels in a very good position.
Yeah. So right here, I heard Scott say, I don't think you have any plays that can take 2 points. And that just feels like such a crazy thing, in my opinion, to say, because there's just so many things to factor in. So right here, he moves DT just outside of range 2, so he's not in melee and chopper. And they're going to hold the positioning because it's a finals table, which is the right thing to do. And so he cannot take a shot at Chopper, so he is going to shoot at Kanan. Kenny has already rolled the defense dice. He has not moved to the attack dice for DTE yet. He declares coordinated fire strain. So converting 2 expertise to 2 hits. So it looks like Kanan might be getting wounded here.
Very, very possible. Like, with all those successes. Oh, yeah.
Strain, 5 damage, exposed. Yep, that's gonna wound Kanan.
Doesn't have force for the challenging the odds, which would that have closed it? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yeah, if he had the force there, he would have been able to close it.
So here we get the Kanan revenge trigger, and because Kanan doesn't have to attack DTE, he can attack Gideon here.
Yes.
Kanan getting back into a lightsaber fight with Darksaber Boy. 4 blocks for Gideon. But it looks like that's enough to wound Gideon. So even though he's still on the point, so he's not able to take that point. But yeah, you're right. If he had 1 force left, he wins struggle 1. That's how close that struggle is.
But Kenny really needed that too, like, because now he's
for sure
very much in a position that he can finally close the struggle out. Both of them are super close. Like, I still like Scott's positioning right now going into struggle 2. I'm curious what the flip is going to be to see if like all of his positioning here will pay off or not.
Yeah, no, Scott's in a fantastic position for struggle 2.
Can he draw a Shatterpoint? And is he going with Hera? I think he's going with Hera because he's pulling a bunch of damage off people. Yeah, he's going with Hera. Here, he only needs to score 3 and get a wound. He already has, 1, 2... He got 3 points, I think.
I think he has 2. He has the point where Kanan held it from DTE, and he has Hera's point. I think those are the only 2 he has at the moment.
That's fair. But he only has to do 4 damage to Iden, which is very doable.
Yes. Agreed. So what they're doing here is just removing all of the successes as they are before they do rerolls. 2 rerolls, 2 crits.
That's good conversion.
It's better to be lucky than good. I believe that's a saying.
Yep. So he wounds Iden here, which means that Kenny will be closing out the struggle. See, now he's trying to position for struggle 2 as well, and get Ezra contesting to tie break that middle area.
Yep. So they're backing up here for just a moment because they realize that they need to make sure that Ezra goes towards an active objective. And so Kenny needs to declare which objective. Yeah. So they're just kind of discussing the points. So Kenny, now they're being clear that they're using the objective in the top left, and Kenny is moving Ezra towards that one. Okay. All right. Need to remember to remove all the tokens and stuff from Ezra. All right. That ends struggle 1. That was a lot of struggle. Might even say they struggled to win it.
What's super interesting there is if, like, let's say that point had been on 1 and like Scott actually had room for momentum, wounding Ezra there would have been very, very interesting.
Yes. Well, it wasn't wounding Ezra. Ezra was already wounded. You're just waking up with that.
Oh, yep. I missed it. Yep.
It's not Long Live the Empire. You dirty Imperial sweetheart, you.
I admit it.
I love this little wooden socket for priority. It's so pretty. Okay, so they're going with the setup that it's the top left, bottom left, and middle right objectives. Shatterpoint looks like bringing Moff Gideon back into the mix.
Ooh-wee.
The more I see Moff played lately, the more I feel like I need to give him some more table time.
He's good. He's good. Like we've been saying it for a while now. Like, I'm so surprised Moff has not won a GT yet.
He has, but
spoilers.
Well, I'm not talking about this one. I'm talking about prior ones.
Did he?
There was the Thrawn Gideon. I believe it was an Australian one. He's definitely
that's right. That's right. I think it's only like 1 or something like that, but it took a while.
Yeah, that might be the only one that used Moff. But he was played like 5 out of 6 rounds.
Yeah. I forgot about that one. I remember. Yeah. That was a cool list.
That was Prometheus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Prometheus. I like how they both drew Shatterpoint to start Struggle 2.
Something I'm curious about, and maybe this is worth like an episode, right? Is reserving Shatterpoint. I don't see it that often anymore. I remember early in the game, like Shatterpoint would be reserved a lot, and I feel like nowadays I don't ever see it get reserved. Like, is this something that people are not using as a tactic anymore? Because I hate Shatterpoint early in a struggle. I really do.
I don't like paying to reserve stuff if I can at all help it. Force too valuable, my bro.
Fair.
So, all right. So we're still resolving Gideon activation. So
Moff
4
tax.
Total damage and push on Chopper.
Moff tax doesn't affect Shatterpoint though, right? It's not technically a reserve.
You're going to ask me a random rules question live in a recording? Thanks, Dyzard.
You're welcome. I'm pretty sure, though. I'm fairly certain.
You go ahead and look that up and make sure we're giving correct information. It's like, hey, here's this finals video where the commentators are going to get a rule wrong for the entire community. Thanks for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
Okay, so with Gideon, he doesn't need to get Chopper off the point because it's him and the DTE, so starts off scoring 4. So this definitely leads me to go, Kenny probably shouldn't be playing for Struggle 2. That's too good of a start. Not in a great place. Pulls Chopper. I think you just try to get Chopper to a good spot.
There is a forum post. Does Moff Gideon's ability increase the cost of reserving a Shatterpoint card? The answer was there is no interaction here. Shatterpoint cards cannot be reserved. So, because the terminology is different, Moff tax does not affect the Shatterpoint reshuffle.
Oh, good to know. Little tidbit of information.
Yeah.
I think I assumed in my brain that it was kind of just all part of the reserving rules.
Mm-hmm.
So Chopper does 6 damage to DTE, which wounds him. Chopper, what a little boss. What a little boss droid.
Murderbot.
Trash can with an attitude.
It's the best attitude, though. I need to paint my Chopper still. Oh, man, I got 5 days to paint a piece of train.
Yeah, you should get on that.
All right, squirrel
Maybe
brain.
one of those roundy, squarey ones.
Yeah.
So at this point, they're realizing that Scott is definitely going to win Struggle 2. So Scott just kind of has an activation to decide where he wants to move models.
I think he's planning for that Struggle 3. He's just like, what am I going to do to make sure I can clutch Struggle 3 fast?
Yeah.
I love it. I love forward planning. Like when when people are like have these conversations in their game, it's just like you are. This is what I want to hear.
Yeah, this is what I want. You want that Bar2 Lando forward planning. That's what you want. What? Who do you start putting pressure on? Like, do you get Kallus low? Do you going after Ezra? Ezra's already got a wound. Do you think the play is get damage on Ezra?
I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I have been burned so many times by, like, especially when it's late game, right? If I can get rid of Ezra early, fine. But late game, there's so many opportunities. And I guess Moff kind of sways this a little bit. But, like, you wound Ezra again, and then you just reserve him, and then Hera can just keep picking him up. Which Moff does come into a factor with that. But, like, I've had games where Ezra's had 4 wounds on him, and he's still just sitting on a point, and I couldn't do anything about it, and that won my opponent the game.
Yeah, thanks. That's nightmare fuel, Dyzard. That's the sort of things that keeps people awake at night, you know.
But it's something to
Ezra
be aware
with
of.
4 wounds.
It's something that can happen. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I do think Moff does come into a factor with that, because you're going to have to reserve Ezra to come to that, like, dream, right?
Okay, so this is just resolving a lot of ISF movement. First attack into Hera.
I would say, though, I do feel like a goal here for me would be to, like, remove Commandos, because it's a fresh deck. If I can get that other wound on them, he only has 1 more activation with Commandos, and they're just gone.
Yeah. Okay. 4 hits, 3 expertise. And then gets a hit from Hask. Looks like 4 total blocks after the expertise defensively. This is a prime example of a moment where I really like when my opponent Ryan, when he starts needing to add in expertise, he just uses a different color of die and puts those things in rather than flip the faces. And that's something I need to get into a better habit of. And this is kind of what the players were talking about in this moment, where Scott had started changing dice and Kenny didn't clearly hear how many expertise there was before things started being changed. And when you're adding in, a hit from Hask and you're adding in expertise, it would be nice to mark those things separately. No disrespect to Scott. This is something I need to do better at.
Yeah. I love the courtesy of these two, though, because every single time I was like, hey, am I within 5? It's not, hey, I'm within 5. Like, accept it. It's very much like, hey, am I within 5? I really just enjoy that type of
fantastic cross etiquette.
Yeah.
Just
I
very clear that these players want the community to grow, want good, clean games. Mad respect for these guys. All right, so they're just doing some final calculations. Make sure they get the right amount of damage going down. It looks like it is damage on Ezra and some conditions. Or is that Ezra wounded again?
Yes.
Poor Ezra. Always a target. Why does everyone dislike Ezra so much? Yeah. They were backing up because they're thinking they needed to pause and do the Iden triggers, the dash and handing out conditions, but realized there was also a reposition, I believe, on his tree that they needed to actually finish first. All right, Chopper is getting strained.
Yep. They're agreeing that the barriers on a gantry do not block.
Yeah, that's pretty much how everyone that I saw was playing it at this event. All right, it was a wound, so we get some more Kanan shenanigans going on. Who is still in lightsabering mode.
Who does he go after, though? Because everybody's dead around him.
He's going back after... Might as well get Gideon off a point if you can.
Oh, yeah, Gideon got picked back up, didn't he? I forgot about that.
Looks like a total whiffy whiff. Kenny got Dyzard dice there for a moment.
It happens.
All right, that ends struggle 2. Not a terribly slow struggle 2.
Going into struggle 3 before the flip, I was still sitting there thinking, like, Scott has done a really, really good job, but I think people like trying to like improve like their gameplay. Like, pay attention to like the extra little moves that Scott is doing. He is preparing for the next struggle every single activation he can. Like, even from the very first activation, you could tell that he is preparing for that next struggle because he doesn't know when he's gonna be able to move that piece again. It's just wonderful to see like him doing this, and I would say Kenny has done it too, but I do think that Scott has like really shown something that the Empire is really, really good at, and that's utilizing their mobility to prepare for the next struggle well before they need to.
Well, I think especially with the additional movement that comes from Iden, just kind of being able to get your guns almost anywhere you want is a huge advantage.
Yeah.
There's such like a mobile strike force. Okay, so we are starting struggle 3. It looks like Kallus is the guy. So it's going to be kind of the little, they chose that it's going to be the kind of bottom left side of the screen and the middle one on the left combined with Hera's Point. Kenny likes keeping Hera's Point active, I believe. So just resolving a ranged attack. So they're just getting through the shoves now. Is that an ISF or is that a Dark Trooper? I think that's a Dark Trooper.
I do believe so. Yeah, it's Dark Trooper. You got the ISF at the top left, on the left side. And then there's one in that bundle on the right side.
Yep. And then gets to do a little bit of, heals the pin off of Ezra. All right, so that does put Kallus up on that point. Not a bad start. So it starts off scoring 3. That's a that's a perfectly reasonable way to start the struggle. Gets DTE, decides to reserve him. And then Iden. I mean, if you're Empire, is there a better flip than Iden at this moment?
When is she a bad flip? Because it's been real. Yeah. I'm like, when is Iden a bad flip?
When you need to force push someone? I don't know.
I guess fair.
They should just give her force push.
You're just going to kill him. Like,
yeah. Let's admit, Iden's a little underpowered. She could use a force push. Doing a little repositioning of the scouts. Probably going after Hera's Point now? Looks like fail. Yes. So it looks like Hera's Point is the priority point. So looks like the ladies are again going to battle over that point. Right here, Scott's kind of factoring in like, does wounding cause problems right now because of Kanan?
Which is always a concern, right?
Like, yes. Well, I feel like he got a lot of work done in maybe the last 10 to 15 minutes of this, where it's like, whatever Kanan does, it sort of matters, but he's just done a lot of work into the Rebels. Looks like a lot of Iden fails in that pool of dice.
Love to see it.
Wait, are you rooting for Rebels? When does that ever happen?
No comment.
Yeah. It was funny.
I'm rooting for both of them.
I went back and I listened to our episode where we were kind of pre-talking about LVO, and you were saying you were really excited about the potential interesting matchup for the finals. And who'd have predicted that it would have been 2 of the exact same roster? I don't think that's happened yet at a GT until now.
I don't think so. It's been like, there's always been like something off, but like exact mirrors is insane.
Yeah. Well, they're not playing the same team, but they have the exact same roster.
True.
Iden's turns are always so scary.
You never know what's going to come of it. Like, it really is, though. Because it's like, this will go either really, really well. Well, this is like an aggro list, right? It's like, either nothing will happen and I got lucky, or the world is on fire. Like, it's there's no in between.
Well, and Iden can be like a million miles away.
Yeah.
So what do you think here? Scott is down to 1 force?
Already, yes.
They're like 3 cards into the deck. Right. Well, they've 2 activations.
But that's like the wonderful thing about Iden, right? Like, who really needs force at this point after she goes?
Yeah.
I mean, I love the GT templates they did for this year. Like, they're just so cool.
All right, so it is now Kenny's turn. He pulled Rebel Commandos. Is this the last turn for Rebel Commandos?
Yes.
That's always awkward. For me, I wish that models did not have that last turn and then leave the table, just from a tactical perspective.
I think it's great. Like, I love the opportunity to get your one last hurrah before they leave the table.
That's
I love that aspect of it. Like, even though, like, and usually in the game of Shatterpoint, like, this is a wonderful thing because you're not, like, you always feel like even though you died, you still have that one last little push you can get, and usually it's inconsequential. Sometimes it can be, but most of the time it's not.
So it looks like they're putting damage into the Imperial Special Forces.
Mm-hmm.
Wants to get that ISF off that midline point. It's kind of interesting where I put that wall actually kind of matters. Because there's that blue wall at the end of the gantry. So he wouldn't just be able to like straight shove him off. He's got to kind of do it off the side of the gantry.
I will say, like, I do love when people put stuff on top of terrain like this. There's just something about flat. People are like, oh, I'm like, why put boxes on top of terrain? Well, this is why you put boxes on top of terrain.
Okay, so Rebel Commandos are gone.
Kenny looks in a very promising spot in Rebel 3. He still has 3 force. Scott only has 1. Like, it's and he's only 3. Kenny's only 3 away from scoring. Like, things feel really good for Kenny right now.
I mean, obviously, in this moment, I would be pretty happy being Kenny. Like, I would be feeling pretty calm. Like, oh my god, am I about to win this GT?
I think one of the scary things for Kenny, though, is Scott kind of has free reign to, like, kill what he needs to kill.
Yes.
Because if Kanan leaves that point, he loses that point.
Yeah. I mean, order deck is definitely going to matter here. Because Rebel Commandos are off the table. Ezra's wounded. And when Ezra activates again, Ezra's going to leave the table. Kanan is wounded right now. So you just have Chopper, Kallus, and Hera who are active at the moment. And so it could go really bad. Like, if he drew, like, Chopper into Kallus, or I think Kallus is already gone, right?
Yeah.
But
it's like Scott drawing Dark Troopers here is actually pretty good because he's able to just go body and just take points for free. Like, he doesn't need to worry too much.
Yeah, agreed. Dark Troopers are a great pull. I mean, are you ever unhappy to see Dark Troopers? I mean,
sometimes actually, like sometimes I actually am, because like I don't really want these guys yet. Is more often the case, just because like I want to be able to be more impactful with my activation.
Yeah.
However, they're not bad to go because the likelihood of them getting got isn't that high. But I do have some damage on them already. So
yeah, I see what you're saying, Diz. I like the thoughts overall. Dark Troopers, just a really solid unit. Here we see they are going to start making some attacks. They're checking to see if Kallus was now within range 5 of Iden, so that the Dark Trooper could potentially get the bonus Hask dice. So here we see the attack and defense roll. Defense roll is fairly average, has a couple of fails. Looks like crit, 2 expertise. Before they do anything else, they're trying to give Kenny a moment to kind of decide whether or not he wants to utilize Kallus rerolls here. We are getting to the point where every force matters, and when you can utilize it to kind of stop someone from taking a point, that's a huge deal now that the Dark Troopers are a bit more spread out. After blocks, it ends up being 2 damage, push pin. What Scott wants to do is shove Kallus off the side of the gantry and bypass the antenna. So these are the kind of delicate shoves that come up in these sort of games that you just sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. So here they called over a judge to make sure that they can kind of get a good angle for where Kallus is going to go from the shove.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that antenna structure.
And I think this is great. Like, if there's any question at all whatsoever, especially at this point of the game, like, it's always good just to call a judge, make that call. Like, don't be afraid to call your judges.
Yeah. Huge shout out to Todd, Aubrey team for running all of this stuff for everyone. Man, put together, got 32 tables worth of terrain painted in a year.
Crushed it.
These are always like the nerve-wracking moments for a judge, right? Because you got to get this right. This kind of stuff could determine the game.
Yes.
Also, the judge is just like trying to make sure my hands stay steady. Let's not. I will say here, I would not have picked up the model. This is where I would have just grabbed a different model, like off a tray, to check.
As I say it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't really proxy as players, but when there's a judge over, it's okay to just grab another model and just be like, let's make sure that this is a safe spot before you touch the placement of the original. But it looks like they got Kallus back into basically the same position. We have the benefit of looking at the video, right? Where we can see, oh yeah, that's basically right. Really, really super similar spot. It's so tough, especially against those rounded edges for the shoves. Yeah, see, this is definitely what I like. Use the other...
When you hold it like that, I don't see a shove angle to get them off. Because you're going through that antenna at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like... Yeah, I agree with Todd there. Yeah. I like what Todd did there because you're holding that other base there. Like, this is where they could fall. And so what is the angle to get to that? And it goes through the antenna. So I like Todd's overall call there.
Sorry.
And,
oh man.
Big block from Kenny.
It is, of course you do.
Yeah. Hey, what do Iden players hate the most? Blocks.
Good dice,
right? Like, I mean, if you play Iden, her natural enemy is J-Lo because she's Jenny from the block. You're upset at yourself because you get the reference.
So anyways, the state of the game is... I don't know how to feel about that one. That was... I don't I got no words. I got no
Just
words
let that
right
one let that one savor.
Oh. All right, so we get some momentum.
Okay.
He ends on 2 on Kenny's side. So Kenny's still in a very commanding position.
Did they forget to put damage on Kallus? Kallus should still have damage on him, right? Like, he definitely just got shot. Because they were trying to shove him, so.
Yeah, I don't quite know.
Yeah. Might have just been overlooked in the moment. Doesn't necessarily matter unless Kallus
gets shot again.
The difference between whether or not Kallus dies.
Yeah. But like, looking at the board state right now, Kenny's still in a very commanding position, but he needs to be getting wounds. And like, yeah. I think this is a spot where like you can really start to see the Moth tax really start to impact the game state.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I want to go with Hera here. I kind of want Kanan, or Kallus. Like I want these other pieces that, because Kenny needs to get some wounds here to like make it more of a winnable state. Yes, it's on his side of the tracker. However, if he doesn't have easy wounds, which right now he doesn't have any easy wounds, maybe the ISF. He could kill the ISF with Hera.
Yeah, it's definitely one where, like, sure, Kenny's in a good spot at the moment, but that could derail very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
His force efficiency is getting rough, but he's got a Hera activation right now. That's you're always happy to have that to put good pressure on the table. That's what you want to get kind of Ezra probably like back into the swing of things. Let's see, so is he moving Kallus? Is that what's happening? Or is he moving Chopper?
I think he's moving Chopper. Kanan.
Okay, it is Kanan. Okay, so just Kanan to kind of a more optimal position so he can kind of threaten either direction. I like that. So she's got, so what? It's an ISF and Iden over there?
Yeah. And a Dark
4
Trooper?
blocks, crit to a hit, so must be attacking Iden.
It looks like a Dark Trooper as well.
Wow, did that just totally whiff? Oh, no. Okay, so it was into the Dark Troopers. Looks like they took 2 more damage. Oh, so that was score 1 for Kenny?
Yeah.
That's rough.
You go from that insane, like really good positioning and like on the board for Struggle 3 to that hurts.
Yeah. It's interesting because obviously the first game that we got out, right, was a Hera shooting into Han and Chewie, right, which who have terrible defensive expertise, and she's getting like, free abilities all the time. And now, when you got to shoot into someone like Dark Troopers, that's rough.
I am curious though, like why Hera didn't just shoot the ISF. I guess
know.
maybe because the Dark Trooper's on the point, he was hoping to get the point back.
No, maybe it's because it started off in melee with the Dark Troopers, so she had to punch the Dark Trooper.
She could just dash out. But it's more so, I think it's just because like the Dark Trooper's on the point and he just needed to get the point.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like maybe the ISF is not quite on there, and
but I guess for me, it's like likelihood of getting the Dark Trooper off the point doesn't seem very, very good. Yeah. Killing the ISF seems fine, and then you're going to remove them off the table as well. He's at a point in like the score tracker that removing the ISF is more impactful to the game than trying to push and get that point right now. This is like one of those points where we talk about where it's like, can I sacrifice points right now to remove models? And I think that was one of those situations where if he removed the ISF, it might put him in a better position, and somebody else could go for the Dark Troopers later.
I was ready to disagree with you, and the more that I think about it, I do think you make a good point. I think maybe getting the wound on the ISF there, and because it also means like where you're at, if Scott only scores 3 and it goes to 0, then you're getting another momentum.
Yeah, and you're fine.
So, yeah.
So based off of where the score is at is the only reason why I say this. If it was like any further towards Scott, then absolutely not. But the fact of where the score is, I think wounding the ISF here would have been the call.
I think that's a good shout. I like that. Not the natural way that a Spectre player usually thinks, right? You're like points, not wounds. But sometimes you gotta think like an Iden player. All right, so reveals. So this is DTE time, it looks like.
Yeah. It's hit mission critical, which that's painful. Mission critical right there. So mission critical going into it. Kenny draws Ezra. You know he's gonna get the mission critical point, so he needs to get 4 and a momentum.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely getting stressful. Yeah, this is also a rough spot for Ezra.
What's Kenny's last card in the deck right now? Is it Kanan?
I think it is.
Part of me wants to say that I think this might have been worth 2 force to reserve Ezra for Kanan, if that is Kanan in the last in the deck, because he needs to make a big play here.
Well, so there is a play here. I was present at the table for this moment. So what he's thinking is if Ezra can get a wound. So what they're doing here is because he's starting off engaged, so he's going to dash away from the Dark Trooper. They're trying to see if he'll hit that ladder to get closer to the ISF, but it looks like he's going to be just short.
Like, because that is a Dark Trooper on that gantry, right? On Kenny's right side.
Yes.
Scott's left, screen left. Like,
or
Dark
kind
Troopers.
Of right in,
yeah,
no,
right there.
the
He's
one,
measuring over.
the screen left is an ISF.
Oh, okay.
So
where's the other Dark Trooper at?
I believe it was a Dark Trooper that's
it's
over there by
Kallus.
Kallus.
Yeah, I see it now. I'm curious so hear me out. I wonder if reserving Ezra to go with Kanan, right? Oh, Ezra was down, wasn't he? So it wouldn't have worked. Never mind.
Oh, man. Too much pressure on that terrain. It's weird how from this camera angle, it looks like Ezra's in.
And from this angle, I would say he's in. But I think it's close. But judge calls, respect the judge call.
Yep.
But like my thinking though, but then like Ezra being dead changes that too, so he does have the force to jump though.
Yeah.
Oh no, he doesn't, because it would cost 3.
Yeah. Yeah, so his plan was if he can wound the ISF and make it over to that point, he can make a pretty big swing.
Yeah. I just feel like going for the Dark Troopers, like with either Ezra or Kanan, like reserving Ezra to get Kanan to like guarantee you're probably going to kill Dark Troopers, that wins you 2 points.
So now he's shooting at the Dark Trooper anyway.
Yeah.
And this is where it definitely hurts, because if he had just stayed in melee, he gets to roll more dice, and he'd get to dash towards the ISF. Instead of dashing, he'd get to advance. And so he does go far enough.
And then he would be able to just body that point.
Yeah. So what's sad is if he stayed and meleeed the Dark Trooper, he gets the wound, and then he gets the extra movement on the tree, and then would be able to have a full advance left. He would have been able to take the point from that ISF for at least that moment, and had a pretty big swing turn. But
well, if he had wounded the Dark Troopers and taken that point, he wins. He wins right there because of mission critical. So if he had killed the Dark Trooper, get a momentum for mission critical, he scores all 4 because Hera's on that back point. So then that would be game.
Yeah.
If that's what the way it would have gone.
Mm.
He didn't score the point for Hera because he wounded the Dark Troopers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, right?
So they just rolled the priority, so they know that he's going to score 3 points plus mission priority, mission critical. Yeah, I think it's a tough spot there. Obviously, there was the terrain shift, and just keep in mind, like, for your watching, like, the camera angle isn't directly above where that template was, so there's still a little bit of parallax. But that was just an extremely close moment. But it does look like if Kenny had meleeed the Dark Troopers, got the same amount of successes, wounds the Dark Troopers, then he's able to go over there, take the point from the ISF, and that would have been a Kenny win. That's how close that game was. I don't begrudge Kenny for wanting to go after the ISFs, right? You just had a total whiff on the Dark Troopers like 1 or 2 activations ago. What about you? What do you think, Dyzard? I mean, obviously, in retrospect, we know he rolled enough dice and there wasn't a big expertise spike on the Dark Troopers.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I think it's just one of those moments where you see a line and you commit to the line, like, and also being mission critical, you don't want to put yourself into the tank to start wasting time thinking too much at that point of the game.
Yeah.
So I
go with your gut.
I think that he just followed his gut. I don't think he did anything wrong. I think this is a very excellent played game that people watching it can look at this and see, like, this is a masterful positioning for a game of Shatterpoint. And there's a whole lot of lessons to be learned overall from what happened in this game.
Yeah, obviously, two fantastic players played something that literally came down to one activation was just going to win for either person. That's how close it was. Man, props to these guys, and cool that they got to drive back together just like right after having played in the finals. They're coming back with a bunch of GT swag, trophies, Golden Child Grogu trophy. I hope Scott sat with it in his lap for the trip back and just admired his Grogu. But also, a little fun story for you. As we were picking up, I realized that Todd had not given them the acrylic templates, the acrylic struggle tracker. And I was like, oh, here, these are still over here. Todd has moved over to like packing other stuff up. You guys both get these. And then I was like, wait a second, Scott, do you want the acrylic tracker that we used for your game?
Yeah.
Because it was mine. I was just like, if you would like to have the one that was used for the game. And Scott thought about it for a second. He's like, yeah, no, I want the one we used for the game. And so I switched it out for him while he was packing stuff up and gave him the one that I won and then had been using for the games at LVO. But man, super cool game, super cool matchup. To me, it's not Iden that's the problem. It's never tell me the odds is the problem. But do you have any final thoughts on the game before we wrap up, Diz?
I don't think either are a problem. I think they both create interesting decisions for players to make and creates very interesting game states. I think
that's
both
such
players...
a pleasant, nice way of not getting all spicy with ominous. I see how it is.
It's fine. Never Tell Me is great. I just think it's definitely at a state that like you need to play Never Tell Me.
You definitely need to understand it and be very prepared for it.
I do think that they played a very well game. I think both players showed why they deserve to be in this game in the finals. I wouldn't say anything was a mistake. I think they both made the right plays, and there's just alternative plays to be made that could result in one thing. But then when you're hindsight looking in, and you say, well, you could have done this line, that changes the whole entire outcome of the game one way or the other, because you change one thing, changes 20 things, right?
Yeah, I mean, a whole chain of things could have gone differently. But it sounds like they've played in a GT before and had the finals go the other direction, where they were both playing in the finals. So pretty cool. I think both of them have a GT trophy now. So love that for those guys. Zion's Finest. Definitely check out their show, the Zion's Finest podcast. Definitely creating amazing content, and huge thanks to both of them, Scott and Kenny, for letting me record, and how easy Todd and Aubrey made it for me to be able to record games, shuffle around the terrain, and just get great content out there for the community. And Dyzard, thank you for doing commentary with me.
Oh, it was a joy. It was a joy.
All right. Well, this is a YouTube video, so the most OP thing that you could do is like, comment, subscribe, and tell Dyzard that you like his goatee. Later, nerds.